On? Okay.
Okay. Each of the lessons in Project Linking Learning are divided into parts. One of the first parts of the lesson is obviously the objective. That objective is, in fact, one of the most important things for you to consider as you start to prepare to teach these lessons. The objective tells explicitly what it is that we're trying to accomplish in 4 different areas. It talks about the thinking skill that we are trying to accomplish, the thinking skill, such as the critical thinking skill of proving with evidence. It addresses the content, the subject matter, whether it's science or whether it happens to be social studies. It addresses the resources that, in fact, we want students to be able to use, and it also is underscored then by a product, an end result, a way in which we can assess the degrees to which students have mastered the particular objective in terms of its thinking skills, its content, and its particular way of trying to get students to understand a standard or to be able to really understand the way in which we're looking at that standard as it pertains to a new thinking skill. Okay, the second area that we're talking about is the idea of the motivation. And that motivation is the way in which we engage students. Each lesson has a motivational part to it. It is really what some people talk about, the way in which we hook a student into a lesson. Those motivations, though, have a particular kind of purpose. It's not just to engage students in the learning process. It is to help them understand the wider dimension in which this objective rests. So we're trying to really open up the students' opportunities, the experiences that might be important as foundation for the rest of the lesson. The third part of the lesson is what we call input. And the input, sorry, I almost used the wrong color there. The input is where we are giving them the information. We are helping direct their attention to understanding the subject matter and also correlating that with a thinking skill. Each one of these, the thinking skill and the content, are really impotent without the other. You can't think about something unless you have something to think about, and you can't, in fact, understand something unless you process it. So these go hand in hand, the thinking skill and the content. The input is also reliant on resources, the way in which we give the students information that either they can seek on their own in a student-directed manner through reading or watching a video, going to the internet, or listening to you provide some of that information. And then last of all, we talk about what is known as the output. Whoops, I'm sorry, it's number 4. The output is the place where we assume that students will do the most important part of this lesson, and that is application. This is where we are looking for that transition from knowing to doing. This is where we're really interested in having students become adept in coalescing the information that they have gathered, understanding how to process it through the thinking skill, and looking at how they can translate it into some kind of means by which we can objectively see the way it has been applied. In many cases, there's more than one output opportunity: to write an essay, to draw a picture, to prepare to talk with other students, to engage in a debate. This application is also where students develop their independence. So let's look at something else for a minute. If you look at the motivation is really kind of teacher-directed, and the motivation brings along the students. They take a less important role, but they have to be there. In the input, again, the teacher is dominant. The students are coming along and, following the teacher. This is not to say that there can't be interaction. This doesn't mean that there isn't some exchange between teacher and student, but really the teacher's in charge. But look at what happens here. Here, the student is the dominant, and the teacher takes on a secondary role, because here is where the students have internalized. They've now accessed the information. They are now assimilating it. They're internalizing it. That's why the application part is so important. I want you to meet some of the students that are in my class. Maybe you know some of them. Here's one student, and she's a really interesting young person. She is always asking questions. She is a questioner. But one of the things I need to tell you is while she's always asking questions, sometimes the questions are not necessarily on target. Now here's her friend, and her friend is a student as well. Her friend is exceptionally shy, kind of withdrawn, has limited experiences, and the concept of limited experiences doesn't mean that she couldn't participate in the experiences. She just, because of a variety of familial, a variety of circumstances, doesn't have the experiences. But she's interested. And then I want you to meet another student over here. And this particular student is rather interesting. This student is highly able. And this student feels that all the knowledge that is presented is something that is already known. I already know that. I already know that. Now, I want you to meet another student over here. This is the student who is destined to be the leader. Watch me, I can do it, I can do it. Teacher, teacher, I know. So this student has, well, maybe a little bit brash at times, some leadership skills, and really does like to exercise them. This is a child who is exceptionally creative, very, very creative. This is a child who has an exceptionally interesting imagination and is very interested in expressing it. What I want you to look at is twofold. One is, if you look at the lesson, are there parts of the lesson where some of the students are most aligned to than others? And that you need to start to think about the fact that we can't educate them all similarly in each one of these facets of the lesson. That we need to start to look at the fact that while we are differentiating the curriculum and providing for this differentiation in light of the development of critical thinking and questioning techniques and depth and complexity and thinking like a disciplinarian, we still have individuals within the group. And we need to start to think about where in the lesson particular individualization needs to take place for our students. For example, I think it's really important that the student over here that is so curious, has so many questions that wants to be answered, is really paid a great deal of attention to in the input section. This is where we need that student to be able to ask those questions. But that's a little bit different than the emphasis that I have for this student over here who really has limited experiences. The motivation part is where this student needs to be really recognized. Now, I'm not saying that these students participate in the lesson individually, but we need to start to recognize how we target questions, how we allow students and their potential, their needs, their interests to be accommodated within the context of a lesson. One of the real interesting issues of gifted education is the fact that we think that once we've differentiated for the students by providing this academic rigor, these challenges, that we've done it. And that's not true. That's only a part of it. The next thing we need to do is we need to look at where in the lesson we can start to individualize. For example, we have a student here who really has the potential to be a leader. Where would you decide that this student would have the best opportunity for individualization? Would it be in the motivation? Would it be in the input? Would it be in the output of the lesson? Or what about this student here who's so creative? Where would you start to really respond to her creativity? In the motivation, in the input, in the output. It becomes your task to look at the multiple layers of this lesson, the pedagogical practices and how they procedurally move from one step to another, the role of the teacher and how it shifts over time, and the need to start to look at how we're going to individualize.